am so excited to be here and have this conversation. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guests. So first, Miranda ADEkoje is a writer for stage and screen and a producer and actress. Her plays include I Am This Place, about Crispus addicts, produced in collaboration with Revolutionary Spaces. Her dream Boston play, Virtual Attendance, is a conversation between two white women on their way to a gentrified Nubian Square. Patrick Gabridge is a playwright, novelist, and screenwriter, and the founder of Plays in Place, a theater company that specializes in creating site-specific work in partnership with museums, historical sites, and cultural institutions. In his Dream Boston play, Echoes, two friends make a visit to the old State House on the anniversary of the Boston Massacre. Kirsten Greenidge is the author of many plays, including Our Daughters Like Pillars, Milk Like Sugar, Luck of the Irish, Baltimore, and Splendor. In her Dream Boston play, The 54th and 22nd, a man and a woman meet up for a blind date at the Shaw and the Massachusetts 54th Regiment Memorial on the edge of the Boston Common. And Melinda Lopez is artist in residence at the Huntington and the author of Mala, Sonia Flew, Becoming Cuba, and more. Her Dream Boston play, By the Rude Bridge, is a monologue for a Revolutionary War reenactor set by the Concord Bridge at the Minuteman National Historical Park on Patriots Day in 2025. I should note, before we begin, that Kirsten will have to step away at 7:45. Is that right? So if you have questions specifically for her about her play, please ask them earlier in the program. And I hope that everyone kind of participates throughout. You know, we have our chats open, so throw in questions, and I'll probably lean more towards those than the ones I even have, because I want this to be an engaging conversation. And I'm sure many of you have listened to these plays. I actually listened to them last night as I ate, and I have so many thoughts. Melinda, would you get into, if you wouldn't mind starting with the origins of this and how Dream Boston began, the roots of it, and how, you know, these plays sort of connect?
Thank you. It's really great to be here, and I'm so excited to be talking about the this project, which was sort of conceived last spring. Shortly after the pandemic shut down the theaters, the artistic staff at the Huntington, we were meeting every day, trying to envision how we were going to stay true to our mission, bringing people together in community when that wasn't possible. An early idea we had was to call individual patrons and read them monologues over the phone. And we did that for a while, just trying to find a way to communicate and connect. And one of the things that was paramount to us was we didn't want to get into too much Zoom tech, because we were concerned about being able to reach people who didn't have access to, maybe didn't understand the technology or the laptops. And at the same time, we were also depressed. And so in conversation, it came up, this idea of longing for a time beyond COVID. This was in April. Dreaming of a time that we could be in community, in places that we loved. And somehow the playwriting prompt came from that. And the prompt that went out to the playwrights was a place that you know and love dearly, that you could describe to someone that would make them feel like they were there, and envisioning it in the future. And the underlying assumption was that this might be hopeful and maybe happy, and it might offer a window beyond the now. We recorded 4 plays in the spring, and of course, what happened at that time, this was end of May, June, was the murder of George Floyd. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery calls for racial justice, and an enormous reckoning that was happening in our country. At the same moment that we were starting to record these whimsical, hopeful, potentially mercurial pieces. And so, of course, the present became very much involved in how the evolution of Dream Boston continued. So we recorded 4 pieces then. I actually think both Kirsten and I ended up re-recording some moments in our pieces before they went live, because we had to reckon with the present. Like the present with COVID, we didn't want to acknowledge, but the present with the racial justice we had, well, I think we longed to. And so we recorded 7 more, there were 7 more playwrights invited to participate over the summer. And so the character of the pieces and the project really shifted to this question that I came up with, that I found myself asking, which is, how do you write about the future when the present is so chaotic? And that I think all of the pieces are really interesting in that they're both looking back and looking forward, and that there's this crazy middle that we're all struggling with. And so they're like little cocktail-sized theatrical experiences that I think we all hope give a kind of a size and a breadth to the many different kinds of experiences that Bostonians and artists and people who populate this community are experiencing.
Will you, if you wouldn't mind opening, would you talk about your play, the place that you chose, and the meaning behind, the way you portray this reenactor talking about this moment where this country was born, though aspiring to freedom that it didn't really achieve. Well, it hasn't at all, but aspiring with big dreams, but I remember listening to that and thinking that it felt ironic in some ways to be at that place on the Concord Bridge. So would you mind talking a bit about that?
Yeah, when I asked myself the question, what would I write about? This is a part of the area that I know very well. I spent a lot of my childhood visiting that spot. I've always found it really peaceful and beautiful. And then when I thought of dates, I realized there was an important anniversary coming up. And so suddenly there was a lot of noise. And what I found myself longing for in that post-COVID world was a moment where, and there's a line in the play, red and blue would come together and drink coffee in the parking lot. That was my greatest hope, was that I was longing for a time when our country would not be so polarized. And what I came to discover was that although that is a ambitious and noble hope, it may be quite a bit longer than I originally thought when I created that speaker. I also felt like it was really important. I wanted to talk about acknowledging moments where we were at war and that we had moved past it. And of course, I also realized as time evolved that we're not past it. And that again might be, as the first play in the series, I see how it can be imagined as ironic. The last thing I want to acknowledge is that character, I was very careful when crafting that character, that speaker, not to identify that individual by political party or by color, political color, because I wanted to say somehow that pride in country transcends political party. And maybe that's a difficult moment to be talking about that. Maybe it's a tough moment to be talking about that. I did go back and rewrite the ending so that the character asks questions at the end about what monuments we will be gathering at in 200 years in another bicentennial. What will we be remembering? And I have very clear ideas about what I hope that is, but I also wanted the play to ask the question and not answer it.
Yeah, he felt like he was asking the questions that we're all asking at this moment in time. The metaphorical monuments and the actual monuments, the ones that we want to see standing after we all, aren't here anymore, assuming there's a here to be in. you know.
And I don't want to monopolize, but I just want to say one other thing, which is like as a child of immigrants, I have a really particular idea of what Americanness means to me, and it's one slice of the American experience. And I feel like the conversation that's happening now is just so much broader about, you know, what it means to have been here for generations and to have come unwillingly, or to have been, you know, be an indigenous person that, you know, preceded all revolutions in this country. So, you know, the conversation that we have about owning our history, I think is a really valid one to be having.
Well, and it was interesting for me because I went from the reenactor in regular attire and as a regular to the man in Patrick's play who was imagining Crispus Attucks, you know, and then the moment that these two people had echoes of the past, to then listening to Kirsten and Miranda's and physically cringing, like parts of me cringed in different ways. I'll speak to yours first, Miranda, because I'm very curious. What reaction did you want from people, especially people in Nubian Square, to feel when they listened to your play? Oh, muted. You're muted. Sorry.
No problem. That's actually something I didn't think about, how folks in Nubian Square, which are pretty much my folks, would feel when they listen to the play, because I think they're feeling it, experiencing it every day as they see what's happening to Nubian Square, aka Dudley, which is what we who grew up there know it as. We're seeing it, we're experiencing it, we're shaking our heads, we're embracing the new, and it's just like we live it, which is why if anyone was going to react or cringe, I wanted it to be the listeners who are blithely unaware of what's happening. You know, I feel like it's time for them to take some of the emotional weight and responsibility for what's going on. Something that was really important to me in my play was to not have a Black voice from the place talk about why it's so important. I sent it to a couple of girlfriends just for, you know, because I like folks that really aren't in theater, but, you know, we'll read a story once in a while and come from different walks to review my work. And they said, well, maybe you need the voice of someone from the place so that people know why it's important. And I understood exactly why they suggested that, but I resisted it because that's the cost of erasure. Those voices are gone. Like there's no one, you know, standing on a corner saying, you can't demolish this mural because no one's saying that, because the mural's gone. And so what we're left with are cringeworthy moments that, you know, that is becoming the dialogue of this our community, you know? So, yeah, if anybody was going to feel anything, I wanted it to be discomfort, and I wanted it to be from the folks that don't have to see this, what's happening every day, and don't understand the weight of it.
So if we're playing with time, let's just like imagine, are we thinking of, and for those who are listening, so there's a Nubian Square that's completely gentrified with like a soul cycle, which is just like rip my heart out, you know? And then we go to the Dome. Are the people in, because someone asked this question in the chat and I like the idea of it. It's, do you foresee a time where some or all of the Dream Boston audio plays could be meshed together in a stage production that would explore our city past, present, and future? Which I find really enticing because I'm imagining the blind date happening as these women are walking into Nubian. Kirsten, can you speak to that a bit? Because definitely the blind date, I was just like, man, this guy is, he's not doing well. You know, like at first I wasn't really rooting for him.
And in 2022, yeah, I mean, I think he's you know, he's stumbling along. It's supposed to be that feeling of like not being able to be with people and coming together and not meshing at first, and then finally, in those last few moments, being able to be together. So in the spring, I think what I was also dealing with just personally was those moments when I did have to venture out in public and was realizing that I didn't know how to be with people anymore. And that, like, in the grocery store, I actually wasn't going to the grocery store much, but when you collided by accident, you're supposed to be 6 feet apart, but sometimes you would get closer and it's like that, ooh, So actually, what does that feel like on someone's voice? Because that's what I have to play with in the play, which is vocal and emotion. And it is awkward when you don't know how to interact with people and be with people anymore. And that's what those two characters are experiencing in that play. So it is supposed to feel as if we don't know how to be human beings anymore and experience intimacy anymore. But what was really important to me when crafting the play is that by the end of the play, there is a coming together. And that was really important, is that if one of my directives, when asked to write this play, which I was really grateful for. So I was asked to write a couple of short plays in the spring, and each one of them I was just extremely grateful, not only for the work, I guess for the work, just because to be able to put my mind to something and think about something other than how to get my kids to the school day, how to get myself through my own school day, is to instill hope in these plays. And so it's really important that when I was crafting the play, that we were hearing people come together by the end of the play as opposed to a rupturing. And so that I knew that I could make many, many things happen within the body of the play, but by the end, even if it was the last two lines in my particular play, this particular play, the two people need to find some sort of meet each other somehow. So I could see, yes, what this world looks like, what Boston might look like in 2022, but I wanted to also make sure that even in those moments where we're not sure how we're living together, that we do find moments where we do come together and are able to meet each other and see each other, even when we don't always agree or know what those interstitial moments are between us as human beings. And I think they do find that in the play, even though it's hard.
I've been thinking a lot about what we will remember this time as, and people on the internet have also been talking about what they would call this period of time. I think one favorite was the weeping, which felt very like torrid, and seeking the joy and in seeking moments of union. I think each of your plays has these, like, it resonates because you bring people together, like there's a coming together in each one in some way. Even Miranda, in yours, where I don't necessarily like these women, but I guess I can connect to them even through time, like each of, and it sort of, it in some ways it's a foreshadowing, right, of what could come. Kirsten, I didn't realize yours was, so the 54th and 22, I said 22nd, forgive me for getting the title wrong. So yours is based in 2022. Were all the other plays in 2025? Or is that what we're looking at? Like,
we were given a range, so it had to be a set at least, I think, 2 years in the future, but it couldn't be farther than 5 or 6 in the future. So they didn't want it to be like 1,000 years in the future. So it was in the near future was the specification.
Patrick, do you want to talk a bit to, I think, what felt like a PTSD, like there was some trauma, and it was like distant, ancient PTSD, and then very recent PTSD in some ways. Could you kind of?
Yeah, I think my piece kind of came out of a mix of, I think it was interesting, like the early plays in this series and the later plays, I think George Floyd and was really fresh when I was given the assignment to think about it. And then I've also been working with Miranda on, we're producing a play at Revolutionary Spaces about Crispus Attucks that she's writing. So Crispus Attucks is very much on my mind too, and the thought of that moment and how they relate together. And I've been steeped in kind of Boston Massacre history from other plays I've worked on too. So, and that space, I think when you're down there, and I've been down there late at night a lot because of when Blood on the Snow ran at the Old State House for a couple years. And it just, something about Boston does have that kind of feeling to it sometimes. If you're out late at night, maybe if you read too much history, like I do, you kind of get this feeling. And then I feel like, you know, what is the moment that we're at now? And it was interesting to kind of looking ahead just a little bit, and they're looking at, you know, we say their names now from, you know, in 2 years, in 2025 or whatever they were. So what's captured from the moment we've just been through, you know, a little bit, and then how does it relate to to this moment of great violence by the state against people? You know, and his interpretation of it is interesting too, in that he sees it as a success of the people in forcing the troops out peacefully. And that's not how we often talk about the Boston Massacre at all. So I thought that was useful to think about, trying to shift that a little bit. And I want to say one thing in response to the question, I'm sorry, but someone said, you know, do we picture them all as a stage play? And I think the thing I like about the pieces that we made is they're very much for audio. And I think they capitalize on that medium well. So I think what's successful about them is it feels like it'd actually be really hard to do these as a play, because they capture your imagination in a way that only audio can do. I was trying to write a play that you couldn't do on stage.
Do we want to get into the technical difficulties of this? How was it hard? How was it easy? What did you enjoy? I was a newspaper reporter before I was a radio reporter, and I can tell you the switch was really difficult and then really gratifying, because audio had always felt more intimate anyway. So what was this like for you when you're used to normally, obviously, putting a play on a stage? Anyone can take that.
I'll go ahead. I've written for audio before, and I've produced for audio before. So I kind of had a sense of what I wanted to do. So for me, it was a real gift that Melinda and the Huntington staff asked me to be a part of it, because it was just really felt good to write for this medium for me. And like I said, it is very intimate, and it allows you to engage the audience's imagination fully. And I think everyone picked spots that, if you're familiar with Boston, really resonate. So you can picture it in your mind. And that's really what you want from great audio or radio stuff. You know, as a radio reporter, you know, like when you catch that sound that grounds you and your audience's ear, that's really helpful. So for me, it was a treat.
I'll jump in. I just want to also give a shout out to this amazing community of playwrights that that populate the city, and that there's just so many terrific writers who are writing for the stage and now writing for audio, and to be able to send out a request like this and engage the talent. I mean, that's also part of when we were thinking about our mission, which is to engage the community. It's also was the community of artists. And so in theory, because of Zoom, we could have gone to anywhere in the world, but there was a really conscious decision to stay here and to hire actors who are here, and not bring in artists from, one of the plays we brought in artists from LA for Rosanna's play. But to the technical challenge as well, and this was especially in the beginning, is that we were using actual recorders, so not Zoom recorders, but and the Huntington has 2. And so that was why there are only 2 actors, was we only had 2 boxes. And so our producers, so Rebecca Bradshaw and Kaylee Chase, they had to physically bring the recorders to the actors. wipe them down with a bag with wipes and all this handy, and then screw in and then someone on Zoom telling them how you screw the thing, how you plug the thing, how you turn it on, is it not on? And so, I mean, like really low tech. And then, you know, the thing is in the box, and then the box has to go back to the sound engineer. So even that part of it was really kind of thrilling, because it really felt like we were inventing something that, I mean, people have been doing all along. But like, maybe you guys can talk to the experience of the recording sessions.
I don't know about anyone else's process. The recording sessions were we would take the play in tiny chunks, read a page, ask questions if needed, and then record, and then go to the next page and record, and just keep doing that over and over again. And then those were all mixed together, and then the sound was layered in. And as for the switch, I quite enjoy the switch. I have always loved radio, so I grew up listening to radio. My dad used to have the radio on all the time. And I think for this particular play, one, because it is shorter, so I think my brain was able to handle this particular switch somewhat well. And then in the actual rehearsal, if there were moments where it was like, where are we in space and time, or this isn't working, it was quite easy to do a rewrite if needed. And having done now longer pieces too, where I kind of get lost or swimming, I quite appreciate this smaller chunk of a play. So it was fascinating and delightful. And also being able to kind of just luxuriate in the world of the oral world, so to speak. But yeah, watching Rebecca sometimes have meetings in the car because she was in between getting the recorder to the next set of artists. So huge shout out to the production team and creative team at Huntington.
Yeah, we had a great sound designer. Our sound engineer really did amazing stuff. Ours, we had to record twice because one of the recorders didn't work the first time around. They got home, and we had a wonderful 2-hour recording session. Like, wow, we really knocked it out of the park, and got back like, oh, one of them didn't work. We had to go do it the next day all over again. And it still turned out great.
That's every radio reporter's nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
I think someone, yeah.
I was just going to say, somewhere there's pictures of Nail Nacer. You know, the actors would have to go to the quietest space in their house, and so the pictures of them in closets, right? And then closets trying to record and just be. And so, yeah, it was neat.
For mine, it was funny because they were in closets and they were really dark, which suited the piece really well because it was it's a spooky nighttime piece a little bit anyway.
Someone wanted to know how the sound effects were created. And I'm assuming you had the sound engineer. There was also sound collecting of ambient sound. Yeah. Was that part of this whole process?
Yeah, that's Valentin Frank, who did all of the plays. He engineered all of the plays, and ambient sound, birds twittering, car trunks slamming, you know, people on the street, fireworks, getting the Boston Pops. You know, there was a piece that's set against the backdrop of the 1812 overture. Like, he did all of that. He's amazing. He's the true genius. Yeah.
Brandon, do you want to speak a bit to the process of how yours was created?
Sure. I had two stellar actresses, and what was great was what I really enjoyed was the fact that they were both in their closets. One had a cat that was in and out of her recording session, but some of the what I loved was the way they were saying the words, because the women in my play aren't meant to be. They're not. I try not to make anybody a villain. I try not to villainize anybody. It's time, it's history, it's all those things. So they weren't meant to be villains that were walking around trying to take down Nubian Square. They were meant to be just transplants, right? Because transplants don't know anything about what was before. And what I loved about the way the actresses approach the work is that some of the names they like didn't know, and they were just kind of working through the text, but in their working through, just listening to it, I was like, this is exactly what it should sound like. It should sound like people who are like, oh, it's Nubian Square. Oh, wait, no, you know, and that was real. And I could really hear that. And that was awesome. And what I loved about the fact that it was audio is that when you walk around, well, when we used to walk around and we used to be kind of in close contact with people, you do hear these conversations. You know, someone's talking on the phone, or you hear it. And I always pay attention to what people say. I used to take, you know, the train quite a bit, and you just, especially because people are on their phones all the time, you really get a little glimpse into like that portion of their life. So it made the intimacy really immediate for me, and it just made this conversation possible. You know, it didn't feel like a stretch, like, oh, I'm really trying to like make this thing work. It just felt like you kind of, you're walking alongside them, and you're hearing that they don't really know the city, and they're excited, and you know, it really worked and lent to the piece. My husband, John ADEkoje, also did a piece, and his was super futuristic and super, I mean, otherworldly. And what was cool about his is the sound engineering made it possible. Like, it couldn't have been done on stage because it had lots of, you know, funky futuristic sounds and concepts. So it was great to be transported with every play, like, to exactly where we're supposed to be, which is, I think, something that theater that doesn't have a ton of money can always do. So it even dipped into film a little bit with the editing and being able to speed up, you know, the cuts and make things create a timing that wasn't there when you originally recorded it. So that dipped into that as well. So it ended up being multi-medium, which is very cool.
There was a line that I remembered that someone said, Nubian Square, really? No, not really, just on GPS. And it was like, yes, I've definitely heard. And I think the cringing is like, I don't know if, did you write in microaggressions? Because they really got it. Like, there are points where I feel like they're being.
Well, no, no, I didn't. I honestly didn't it wasn't intentional that these would be like little microaggressions. It was just, I said, how would people talk about this place if they don't know anything about it with no context? And it's easy to do that, right? Because they ended up stepping on things that who know what Dudley was or is, we're like, ooh, but they're just stepping on it because they just don't know. So it ended up working perfectly, because that is, I mean, you know, when you put in something and you're like, wait a minute, that's not what it's really called. It's because GPS takes a couple of years, right, to catch up to what's happening actually in the cities. Yeah. So yeah, it just, it happened so naturally. And I just appreciate the actors, because as they got into a groove, they were really like, oh, okay, like, let's go. And they really, really went for it. And just, I use terms like Sandy Station, like, that was like the idea that everywhere there are Sandy stations, that's sanitization stations, but they made it their own, because now it's part of the dialogue, it's part of the vernacular, like it's what we, you know, hand sanny or whatever, you know, our language is changing because of COVID. And that's really interesting as well, like mask up, you know, it's just becoming part of our everyday language. So they also embraced that in their own way, which was really exciting to hear. I didn't even think about it, because when you're writing, it's in your head. Like, but when someone else says it, it's like, oh yeah, that actually is how it would be. You know? So yeah, it was really great, thrilling process.
I want to get Kirsten. I want to ask you some questions before you have to go. One of them from the audience is: are there any of these plays a starting point for you for any larger works based on these ideas? And I wanted to ask you, you know, why a blind date? What made you decide to go the route of something that actually even right now is such a challenging thing, because it's become, it's not even, I mean, I guess it was formulaic, and now it's like, I just got to make sure that you're like not sick, you know, and then let's move on, you know.
I think that's just because, you know, so I'm quarantined there's 8 of us in here. And I live with my sisters, my husband, and my mom, and our kids. And for a little bit in the spring and into the summer, my sisters and I started just trading articles about dating life and like hookup culture that we are not a part of at all. And we were just like, first of all, just fascination, and also like, how is this working? Pure curiosity. We're all writers too, so in that sense, it's all fodder for the three of us. For this could be this. One is a novelist. One writes history, and actually, she is basically always in like years 1911 to 1925. So possibly not for her. She's just interested in it. And then for the two of us, it's always almost going to be something else. And so I just got interested in like dating culture because I don't know how it works. And also I'm married, so that's not my life. I can explore that life in a play because that's not what I'm doing. And so that I put that in this little tiny 10-minute play. And also, again, what might it be like to be quarantined? I was also interested in people who were quarantining alone. Like, what is that journey? And from texting friends. So I had a very robust texting life for a while, checking in on friends who live alone, and them checking on me, who was like sandwiched between generations, because my spring and summer was a little bit stressful, living with my mom. I'm not taking care of her, but I care about her, and my kids. And so we're all checking in on each other. And so I was just interested in that and that blind date, like what happens when you can maybe go out and meet somebody. That part isn't in the play about like, the tests that you would need to do and would be all that conversation. But I'm assuming that, yes, that's what they would be doing before they meet out in public. Right now, I don't think I'm going to meet these people in a longer play yet. But also my plays usually take about 2 to 3 years to gestate. So it's still a young blade of a thing, like a little blade plant. So we'll see. Could be maybe in a little bit. And then things will change because the world I put them in will change because this world has changed too, if that makes sense.
I just wanted to also add what I love so much about that play, the 54th and 22, is that like how much grief those characters are carrying that they don't articulate. Like you don't understand so much until the very end of it, and that she's carrying this like grief and he's carrying this grief, and yet they're just trying so hard to be normal, which is what we're all trying to do. Like I feel like one of the things that I experience daily is lack of capacity to express how devastated I am, and just trying to get through the next moment. And that your play does that so well, that it just comes out in this like last breath of it, and you go, oh my God, these are real complex people with all this life stuff. And a number of the plays do that. Kate Snodgrass's piece is about saying goodbye to a father, and Brenda's piece is the same. And so there's thematically stuff that's interesting that kind of comes in up and down. Pat and I going back to the American Revolution, and then the way different writers are coming at this moment. With some like echoes, right? It's like Pat's play. There's echoes. So if you listen to the whole series, you hear these thematic things, and I just think that's really cool.
And Kirsten, I was just going to say the way that you divided them by monuments, the way that you use the monuments as this thing that she initially judged him based on. Like, you're arriving to this place and this is what you consider important, but that's not me. This is what I consider important. This is what I carry with myself that I haven't overcome. So I don't want to walk with you because obviously your priorities aren't the same as mine. Like that it was just fascinating. Do you have to go?
I do. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. But I don't want to go, which is an awful feeling. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. And full disclosure, I'm just going to auditions at the place where I work at BU. So thank you so much for this conversation. It's been so lovely to be here with all of you and to have community with you. And see you soon, I hope. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. So another question from folks. Lo called it completely transporting. And was it a tough process to make these stories so tight and condensed? The experiences were so much larger than the several minutes at a time.
I mean, I like the challenge of writing short. I write a lot of short pieces, just in my playwriting. In the writing I do for play, I write short pieces a lot. But it was fun. I like that amount of time. And also, not only was it we were writing a short amount of a short thing, but the assignment was write it quickly. So like you would get the assignment and like, we want you to write it in a week. And I thought that was really good because first I was like, oh man, I'm so busy. How am I going to do this? But I was like, oh yeah. And just pow, and you want a piece that's short like that to come out kind of all at once, in my opinion, that you want it to kind of sit on it for a bit and then boom. If you twizzle with it too long before it comes out, then it feels like you had to work to make it. I think you want something that feels organic and then chip away at it to make it fit what you have there.
I completely agree, Pat. There's something about the tight turnaround that made me write instinctively and actually reactive. It was a reactive piece because this mural in Roxbury called the Roxbury mural, it said Roxbury Love with Mandela's face, had just been demolished by I guess a developer because luxury condos are going up, and they demolished the mural and didn't tell anybody, and the community was in uproar, and all this stuff was going on, and obviously we had Black Lives Matter, and it just felt like, and the ability to like pour it out on a page without the work and workshopping that goes into a full length, and it's like you may write instinctively at the beginning of a full length, but then you spend years sometimes sanding down and making, layering, and it loses some of that. It can lose some of that punch, right? This was all punch, because we were able to do it so fast. And also we were in the hands of such wonderful production professionals that like when the production staff at the Huntington read it and they said, we get it. We get what you're saying, yes, it just felt so good because it was like, oh yeah, okay, great, like little tweaks, but then that's it, So when you're in, I think that speaks to the process as well. When you're in the hands of folks who understand theater, who understand the goal of what they're trying to do, but also your voice, because we all have very different voices, I think, as playwrights, and to know that they could customize the experience for all of us when we were all coming from like different places and I felt safe. I knew my work was going to be produced well. That's the best feeling in the world, right? Because then you're just like, you're flying because you got the best actors, you got great production staff, and that because my piece can be seen as, it was cringy at times, it was a bit risky because it went at the Huntington as well, and it was embraced because of its point of view, and I really appreciated that. I really did, and I think the amount of time that we had to write it was correct, and the amount of pages that we had to write was correct for the medium, for the time, for the project. So I just thoroughly enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, and you've had a couple plays that have kind of lingered in that kind of development cycle that playwrights get in for a while. Forever. And then the play that we're having you write about, Christmas Attics, like it was going to be a thing where what was nice about it was a commission that was going to be done. Like it was in the pre-pandemic world, what was going to happen was that play was going to be written this spring, and we would have had 180 performances this summer at Old State House. And so that I was glad that you were a part of this too, to like, oh good, we get to make an audio play that's going to happen and make it happen. Cause I felt like you're breaking out of that cycle with the Addicts play.
Yeah.
And then
Then
we
the
just got
Addicts
wrecked,
play.
you know, now it's 2021, maybe, you know, we're hoping.
Yeah. Something else I'd have to say is, I mean, everybody's focused local and inward because of the pandemic. For me personally, on my journey as an artist, as a writer, as a playwright, as a theater maker, has been wonderful, because suddenly people are saying, oh, we want you to write a play. Like, you know what I mean? Which wasn't, it's not that it wasn't happening, but it wasn't happening to Pat's point, to production, you know, before this all happened. Whereas now I've had, you know, I would say by the end of the year, I'll have 3 pieces that I know at some point will get produced or have already been produced. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I am this place. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We will get it there.
Melinda, I was going to ask you, but also this is sort of a question for everybody as we're wrapping up. In theory, I'm asking you about the future, but I'm also asking you about yourself. What would be your dream Boston play? You know, where do you see yourself in the near future following the pandemic, if you are the character in your own piece?
Oh. Wow, I was not prepared for that. You know, the first word that comes to mind is space, and I'm not sure what I mean by that, but I think maybe it has to do with both like feeling confined and restricted, and having the opportunity to just be somewhere where there's like people and air and horizon, but also having space in here that's not so crowded with fear and protocol and like there's so much minutia to living through this moment, and you know, also so much grace and so much privilege, but the moment to moment stuff, it feels like calcifying, and the thought of not having to think about that, imagining a time that breath and air and space exists, is my dream. Yeah, for all of us.
I think that's a lovely answer, honestly. How about the rest of you?
It's funny, actually, right now I'm in a weird existence that's quite similar to my play, in that I am in the midst of writing the first draft of a play to be staged at Old South Meeting House. So for I'm in rough draft mode, which on a historical play that I've been researching for months, so that I have to literally like turn off my brain and open up the thing that happens in the play in my world for usually 4 or 5 hours at a time, and let stuff come out in that way, and have the echoes of around basically the 1770s pop in my head and onto paper for a couple hours every day. And it's a disconcerting, in the play it's a little disconcerting when it happens. It's like that when you're writing a play like that too, but it's also really invigorating in the same way that I think they feel. I don't know if that sounds too cryptic or weird, but
No, not at all.
that's my life right now.
I would say for me, the one benefit of this time, and it came through some really gruesome means, but the one benefit is the exposure. Things are getting exposed. People are getting exposed. Institutions are getting exposed. White supremacy is getting exposed. It's getting air. It's getting that air that you're looking for, Melinda. And it's not a nice thing, you know? So we're like, oh, no. We want to put that away and no one talk about it, because that's not a good thing. But for those who are being oppressed by this thing, we need it out there. And I think exposure for me has been the most transforming thing that's happening right now, is that those things that are said in the dark, those things that are done in the dark, those things that are so insidious no one knows about, but are affecting groups of people like so massively, are finally exposed. They're in the light, and the thing about exposure is once something's exposed, everyone has to deal with it because there it is. We see it, it's been named, we see how it's killing people and harming others. And we have a collective responsibility to do something about it because now it's out there. So I have to say, for me, exposure, I think, is the biggest thing that I'm taking from this, and hoping that there's a movement around, is how we see it now, right? Like, you can't deny it anymore. And those who are denying it are basically showing themselves as well. So I just think it's a very unique time in this. Like, the timing and the way things has rolled out has been exhausting. I mean, it's like being hit over the head again and again and again. However, if you are a person for whom life has been doing that because of the color of your skin, or, you know, who your parents are, where they were from, or where you happen to live, this is just another thing, you know? I think for some people it's like, oh, what's going on? You know, this is the end of our life. Like, this has never happened before, but you just have to imagine those people for whom these kind of situations are their entire life. So it just becomes that hustle, that struggle, that, like, this just adds to it. Yeah, it's bad, but for those of you for whom this is the first time, congratulations. That's privilege, you know? So for me, I'm grateful for the exposure of these societal ills that keep us from being that more perfect union, right? That we say that we're always striving for. In order to get there, we have to see the things that are keeping us and hindering us from being there. And those are finally out. So now it's like sitting back, just looking like, all right, what are we going to do with this thing? So
There's something incredibly sacred about cauterizing the wound. But I mean, healing is not ever done simply, right? Like, healing takes time and energy. And I think my colleagues and I always discuss the renaissance that this time will be for so many artists across mediums. And I think we'll see it in the next decade of the art that is birthed from both the suffering and the survival and the resilience, because it's beyond just the stereotype of we've overcome. Like, no, like, people have been overcoming for decades, you know? Like, if you're overcoming now, like, okay, but, like, you know, this is not new. Survival instincts are what's getting people through this. And hopefully now we're at a point where we can actually deal with trauma, you know, and, like, address some of the things that are just the echoes, as Patrick pointed out. The echoes will linger with us for quite some time.
Yeah.
Patrick, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I love what you both had to say. Yeah, it's interesting. This is of a moment, but I remember in the election 4 years ago, speaking of trauma or not, my daughter, who is Black, but was in high school at the time, had a lot of white friends who were just, I guess they were starting in college at that time, who were just shocked by the election. They just couldn't believe it. And my daughter and I were talking, and we were like, yeah, not so surprised. I will say the last 3.5 years have had more surprises than I had expected. But, you know, I think, yeah, I think what Miranda said, but yeah, we've been seeing that for a while, since 2016, of people seeing things for the first time, and a lot of other people are like, yeah, okay, welcome. But it's hard. The dominant culture has a hard time seeing it, and it's not like we want to think like the blanket is ripped away and now you see it, but the blanket goes back on really fast. So it won't be this isn't the first time it'll be revealed, and it won't be the last.
I think that we're wrapping up, but Thank you all. This was wonderful. I enjoyed this conversation so much.
Hi,
Thank you
I've come
so
back
much.
on to say thank you all for this wonderful conversation. To our panelists, Miranda, Patrick, Kirsten, and Melinda, to Cristela, our moderator, and to all of you listening to this lively discussion, thank you for being here. Please be on the lookout in your inbox for other special events upcoming, including Revolutionary Spaces event tomorrow night called Finding a Voice with the Vote, 18th Century. Visit wbur.org/events for more upcoming WBUR City Space events. And please visit huntingtontheatre.org to listen to more of our Dream Boston plays. Thank you all. Stay well, and we hope to see you soon.